So the happy path from the Microsoft. Usually you're starting with a web app or static web app as a front end, and then you're developing some kind of an API with Azure Functions. And it's a super simple way to start if you don't have any extra dependencies and can easily tackle complexity with Azure Serverless Functions. And the next step, if your application becoming more complex and there is extra dependencies and you need to containerize it, dependencies of application is growing, your next step in evolution is Azure Container Instances. It's a simple service without orchestration and scale of your application. And it's super simple to build your container with Docker and just ship it to Azure Container Instances. You can deploy container groups there, but it's still a service for quite simple cases. The next step is Azure Container Apps. It's a serverless offering from the Azure. It's based on the Azure Kubernetes service, but Azure Container Apps essentially isolating Kubernetes APIs from you, and you receiving the wrapper that can handle your container scale. And it's super easy to start with it, and it's super easy to get benefits from Kubernetes without its complexity. And this is a must-have service if you want microservice architecture without complexity of AKS. Then, if your application continue to grow and you need more dependencies, you can abstract them with the Dapr framework. You can leverage the Dapr power by using Dapr extensions on the Azure Container Apps. They have slightly simplified manifest, but it's still doable, and it's super easy to start with the Dapr. And if you will switch to Dapr during usage of Azure Container Apps, it will be super easy to migrate to Azure Kubernetes Service in case you will need more fine-tuned configuration of the Kubernetes and you need complex configuration for your networking. And if you will start leveraging AKS and continue leverage it with power of Dapr, it will allow you to migrate off the Kubernetes in Azure to on-premises, because there are a lot of cases for this kind of migrations now, and edge services are developing quite fast. And this way you can have this kind of happy path from Microsoft, by building your application, make it more complex and integrate it with more and more services, and essentially make it cloud agnostic with time. And last but not least, the serverless container landscape covers and allows you to ship your containers between different cloud providers and run them without complexity of Kubernetes. On Azure platform is Azure Container Apps. Essentially, it's wrapper over Kubernetes. There is Azure Service Fabric, quite old orchestrator, the native to the Azure cloud, but it won't allow you to scale down to zero. So it's not fully serverless, but the deployment of your containers, they're quite easy and it's quite robust and it's still working, still supported. AWS App Runner, it's not based on the Kubernetes itself, but it's also allow you to run your containers and scale them in the cloud. And Google Cloud Run built on top of Kubernetes with help of Knative framework. To run serverless containers and do the orchestration without exposing internal APIs of the Kubernetes. There is also native orchestrator like AWS Fargate from the AWS, and there are also frameworks that allow you to run serverless containers on any environment and any cloud. So you can use Knative or high-scale IO to host your serverless containers and get rid of Kubernetes complexity.